And good morning from Washington. And Paul Brown inspired me to do this video on liability. But I'm going to start off on toxic contamination. Okay, so there's a lot of toxic things around the machine shop here. And to my right here, I have the cutter grinder with diamond wheels grinding carbide. And carbide is extremely toxic, and I believe the worst part of it is the cobalt in it. It's just like real bad. So I have a vacuum cleaner setup that works pretty good. And I could get into a lot better pollution control with this. I think the ultimate would be a restaurant grade hood, like they'd put over a fish fryer in a restaurant. Because, you know, you go into a nice restaurant, you don't like it smelling like fish. So they figured out how to ventilate the fish fryer. And that, that would be the ultimate for that. So I'm controlling the carbide with a vacuum, and it's working fine. If you can smell the carbide, you're being contaminated by it, and carbide has a distinctive smell when you're grinding it. So you want to control that carbide, okay? And okay, now I'm going to get into this. And there's two schools of thought on this, and maybe others, I don't know. But I've worked in shops that did, and I've worked in shops that didn't. And the shops that did, I did what they did. And that's spraying air nozzles, blowing the chips off machines and stuff like that. That's real common and probably absolutely necessary in the CNC industry. But you got to think that those CNC's a better deal for that because it's all in a box. And so you definitely do not want to use air to clean the cutter grinder. That is really dangerous, and it'll blow that grit all over everything anyway, worse than it gets. So no air, right, on that. You don't want to use an air gun. Okay, cutting fluid. Oh, here's a good one. The first thing I have here, and it's the absolute truth, is no air. If you're using cutting fluid on the lathe here, tapping and stuff and cutting and stuff, you're absolutely going to be breathing that cutting fluid if you blow those chips with that cutting fluid on it. It's going to atomize, and it's going to be in the air, and you're going to be breathing it. And when you can smell it, you're being contaminated. When you start tasting it, you're there, you're contaminated. And I tell you, carbide, threw my pen away. Carbide, you can taste that instantly. You really can. You can smell it, and you can taste this metallic taste. It's not good for you at all. Okay, so cutting fluid, don't blow it around. Minimize contact. Now, I got some cutting fluid here, Tap Magic, and I've got some old cutting fluid here. I don't know if you can see it in the window there. There's Mystic Metal Mover over here. Let's see, maybe I can just rotate over here a little bit. There we go. Maybe you can see around tailstock. There's Yellow Can Metal Mystic Metal Mover, and Tap Magic Pro Tap. Well, I'm not going to drag it over here, but the first thing it says on the modern stuff is minimize contact and do not breathe it. I mean, right there. And right on the can, it says minimal, use a few drops, minimize use. Well, okay. And it also says environmental friendly and biodegradable. But if you breathe enough of that stuff, it's going to biodegrade you, I guarantee you. And they've changed the chemicals in this stuff to kind of get around things. But I've noticed this new cutting fluids still can stain metal, still have the smell of the Mystic Metal Mover years, and Tap Magic used the same thing, and that is 1,1,1-trichloroethane. And that, interesting enough, if you watch, there's some videos done on Lost Creek machine tool, and he had on his shelf there a can of Mystic Metal Mover, and that freaks some people out. I mean, some people, and they're likely right, that 1,1,1-trichloroethane is not good for you. But I'm gonna say, even though the new stuff is biodegradable, I don't think it's good for you either. So minimize contact. We need to use these things, all right? Now, one of the things that I've done to minimize contact is I use this, I take the Mystic Metal Mover and other stuff, and I melt it with beeswax. And I got this paste here, see? And I just brush a little bit on the work, and it makes that Mystic Metal Mover and this other stuff go a lot further. Well, the Mystic Metal Mover is just a tiny bit left. That's like 30-year-old can, you know, I never getting rid of it back then. But I got this batch here with the Tap Magic, and it's working fine. So I don't know. I'm not sponsored by Tap Magic, but it's working. All right. So that's how I'm minimizing contact. I use a brush, rag, and vacuum cleaner, and get the contamination off the machines. That's what I do. Okay. Do what you want to do. But I think it's best to minimize, as a recovered cancer patient, I would recommend minimizing your toxic chemical and metal intakes. Okay, now we're on to the metals themselves. Now, when you cut metal, there's a whole lot going on. And right at the point of that cut, it's hot, and it's vaporizing the metal. And I've learned this years ago, a lot of, with the nuclear stuff around here, a lot of beryllium was used. And it's relatively safe in an alloy, and that's mostly what you're working with. And it can be alloyed in many different ways, even to the point of making hand tools, sockets, wrenches, and things like that, hammers. Well, when you're machining that, though it's relatively safe, you're actually breaking it right down to separating the alloys, turning it into near plasma at the point of the cut. It's small, but you will notice things. That when you're cutting metal, whether you have no cutting fluid or anything on it, you get this metallic smell in the air. Well, that's atomized metal you're breathing. So you really need some good ventilation. And especially if you're, turning things. And they found that, like 12L steel like that, they were trying to ban that in Washington here at one time. I don't know if evidently they didn't. But the lead will vaporize out of 12L. And, it might be a very small amount. But if you're in a confined space like this, and some shops are very confined or were with bad air circulation. I have a good fan. You can probably see it, I don't know, up into the corner, up in the peak of the roof there. And this is a very small shop. Yeah. I can evacuate the air pretty quickly here. So, again, when you're cutting metals, there's all these particles of it everywhere. So, no air. You don't want to blow. When you're blowing the machines off, you're blowing all this stuff in the air. And you don't want to, in my opinion, use air hoses at all around machines. I think it's just horrific practice. Okay, site contamination. Now, this is something to think about. Now, more than once, I have rented places that are old industrial areas and stuff like that. And you don't know what's totally gone on in the past, or maybe you should ask around. Now, there's one place I rented, it was a body shop. And the guy, really good, he, instead of body putty, he used lead. And he had a sign outside his body shop, and it says, "I use lead." Well, what he did was he used lead and he sanded it into little particles, and then he washed the work while he's working metal with Stoddard solvent, and which is your regular safety solvent, and that's a big deal. And so he for years, he dumped all of his waste solvents, the paint thinners and that lead and all that stuff on the property. And I caught wind of this. This is Washington State. So I had to make sure that every single thing that I purchased, chemicals, oils, and everything that I could account for. And in the end, after several years in that location, it actually saved my ass, because people are always trying to shift liability, and they can play shenanigans on you. And I was able to avoid that, because when confronted with it, I go, oh no, all the solvent I use went back to this place. See, and I had to make sure that I took the time to dispose of all of the solvents and everything that I used. And I could that turned into quite a story with a lot of people. And the EPA people were kind of crashing into a lot of shops and going, "What are you doing with this solvent?" And other things too. Okay. So cover your ass, recycle, know where the stuff's going, because they'll find out. The EPA can go to the oil company, which they did, and they chased everybody down the bought safety solvent, which isn't so safe after all. Okay. Now we're in the liability. And this is what Paul Brown got me on. He did a video of turning a automotive disc brake on his 14-inch Southman. It was really cutting it nice. And I mentioned to him that I can't do that in Washington because of the liability. And as a business, I'm not a business now, but I wouldn't do it. But even the businesses here, I don't think anybody will resurface a disc brake, even if they have the machines to do it, because of the liability to keep from getting sued. The first thing, now this state here is different. It's totally different over in Idaho and these other states like that. But Washington's, like California, they sue the pants off Santa. That's why Santa don't come to Washington or California anymore. So you can get sued for anything at any time and lose. Same with New York City, right? You get sued for anything and lose. So you want to minimize your liability. And the best way to do that, and I hate to say it, is do not do work for individuals. And it's getting worse and worse dealing with individuals. What I ended up doing, and if I was getting going again, is start doing service work for other professional businesses that don't have machine shops that need machine work. Individuals will totally waste your time. And I can tell you, I'll tell you this. There's this race car engine builder here, and he's good. And he's so good, he moved to where they build race car engines, wherever that is. But he had like 3 stopwatches around his neck. And when people called him on the phone that he's doing projects for, he starts a stopwatch. And then when they get the bill in the end, they go, man, what's all this stuff? I go, well, hey, you called me all these times. I had to click this stopwatch. He was, I went over there once and he had 2 people on the phone. He'd unclick this one and get up there again. But people, he had to do that, when you're one person. Individuals will totally waste your time. And I hate to say it, it's really true, and they'll cause you the most grief. And I got a laugh out of another guy, a professional here who works on cars, and how many times have you heard this? Well, it didn't do this before. And you hear that, and you go, before what? And they go, before you worked on it. It's a lot easier to deal with another business. You can iron these things out. So minimize your exposure to the general public, okay? So we covered brakes in the state of Washington, replaced with new parts. Now, see, that got so bad. If you look at some of these early photos in the shop I had, I was just doing a lot of general work on motorcycles, had a helper or two, and changed oil, worked on brakes and stuff. But I had to stop because that added, at one point, $12,000 to my insurance. And I go, whoa, I can't do this, it's not worth it. And plus putting up with, one of the problems back then was a lot of inexperienced people on motorcycles. Okay, so I ended up just kind of concentrating totally on the machine work and doing crankshafts and, and cylinder heads and stuff. Okay, the next one's guns. And I'll tell you what, now if there ever was a liability, it's that one. And my advice is, don't work on And if you're thinking on working on them, you shouldn't work on them because you don't know how to work on them. And those things are so specialized, and you got to understand that the pressures involved, you know, if you with the chambers and stuff, people get blinded and injured and stuff like that. And if you look at some of these videos on YouTube with guns blowing up, you'll see, don't work on them. And then plus, yeah, in this state here, you have to have multiple licenses, pay all kinds of taxes, and it's just, you got to have the correct training, licenses, and stuff like that. I don't have it. Don't do it. You know, and I tell you what, gunsmiths, this is one of the reasons why I never got into it. They don't have good equipment like this. They don't make enough money. It's a bad business, in my opinion, unless you're the right guy or something like that. But I worked on hydraulics and power sports and all that, and that's how I got all this stuff. You know, gunsmiths don't, but they don't need all this stuff. You know, it's like gunsmiths are like specialized machinists. They're just really focused on one thing. I work on everything like that. I know a gunsmith, and I says, man, I won't work on guns if you won't work on hydraulic pumps. He thought that was good, but he didn't like all that oil. Okay, now down to regular hazards here. So this is kind of a long video. So the regular hazards in the machine shop is something like this axe in here can pull you in and kill you. Wouldn't even miss a beat. And the rest of the stuff can really hurt you really bad. So I have 5 decades of experience. And I'm just going to do what I do. And I know where to stand and how to stay out of the way. And I think I told the story when I was a millwright in the sawmill. And my real job was in the machine shop. Running the machines. But when I had to go out, and there's several times when I had to go out on the floor of the sawmill to see, you know, look at equipment or, you know, figure out how to make something work, you know, from the machine shop angle, I was often told, don't stand there, you might get killed. So anyway, that's kind of where that is, you know. I wasn't experienced enough on the sawmill floor, and there's a lot of stuff that's not guarded. You can't have guards on everything in big operations, and so I won't have guards on this cutter grinder, and for the simple reason it's pretty difficult and maybe even not possible in some circumstances, but I'm going to make videos using this old cutter grinder without guards on it, probably most of the time. But I'm going to stay out of the zone, and I'll always point out where to stand on that if you're watching. Okay, that's the regular hazards. I covered toxic contamination, liability, and regular shop hazards. Okay, I will be back with more action-packed videos. Stay safe.